Hello, hello. I'm here. It's late, and I'm just up, I guess. Jeez. Let's start the stream. Why don't we? It started already. Right? Anyway, hey, what's up? I'm here. And I'm just chilling. I'm also testing my mic volume. It sounds okay. Just the mic? I don't know. It's not as clear as I wish it would sound. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Do I have some software on? No. Maybe not. Let me try MetaQuest. Turn off that shit. Give me 1 second, and I'm gonna stop. I was also trying to decide on what to do. Watch or draw something. What? Watch or listen to something, I mean. Oh, let me look at this Maximilian video. Oh, let me choose audio.
What's up, dudes? Max here. Kind of an impromptu video. I am literally going to be making this and cutting it up right in the moment. I had a friend hit me up, and he immediately said, "You have to watch this." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And the video link was to a Marvel vs. Capcom collection title update. And I'm like, wait, what am I even reading? The game's been out for like 6-7 months or something like that. So anyway, for those that don't know, we already kind of got a title update for the Marvel vs. Capcom collection back when it came out. Like the Juggernaut glitch, a thing that everyone complained about, like almost made Juggernaut kind of a playable character in MVC2. It wasn't working in the collection. So there were also several other things like audio bugs and all this kind of stuff. Sentinel saying the wrong lines, like all of that.
My bad.
But, you know, the fact that we got an actual update that addressed some of the problems in those games within a short period of time, like a month back in 2024, was a pretty big deal. Because that typically does not happen for these collections of games. But I will say, I've been, like, randomly talking with the MVC heads. I followed them all, like the MVC2 community. They would ask me at times, like, hey, what do you think about a patch? You think we're going to get rematches, all that kind of stuff? I'm like, dude, these Capcom, like, we're lucky we got what we did with what happened back in 2024. These collections of games from Capcom never get big updates after they come out, dude. Like Capcom, the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, Fighting Collection 1, like there might be some small things at the beginning, but over time, are they big supported titles over time? They're not. And unless it's like a Third Strike Online Edition or a Darkstalkers Resurrection, something that's one individual game, having a collection of games be updated over time just doesn't make much sense because they already made their money, dude. Like they're not really going to sell a ton more copies. So I don't know what we're getting into. I'm naturally pretty excited because I'm making a video in the middle of a day on a Monday, my normal day off. So I'm just going to fire this up. There's a lot of things that are immediately coming to head in my brain of, oh my God, if you could release another title update for the MVC collection, what would it be? And I think I'm just going to shut the hell up and find out what they're actually doing before I say anything more. Okay, yeah, them's the games. You right. You right. Yeah. What are you doing? What's happening? What's happening? Okay, that's very soon. Bro, no way. Bro, okay, I'm let the trailer rock. No way. Oh, dude, they're upping the resolution. Oh my
nice.
God, thank God. Oh my God, they can actually. Oh my God, thank God. Oh my, is this a legit versus mode? First to, oh, you could, wait, did that say rematch? Long button presses to avoid accidental inputs. Okay. Reset the game directly from the pause menu. What? Oh, so you don't have to go back to the main menu. That's just nice. That's just nice. Wait, what? There's new artwork? There's new... Wait, there's new remixes? Wait, what? What? Hold up. Hold up. These changes are coming to both Capcom Fighting Collection and Capcom Fighting Collection 2? No way. So if we go back to the first... Wait a minute. It isn't just an MVC collection thing? Even the first Fighting Collect... Oh my god. Oh my god. So all the Dreamcast games are going to have better resolution. That is so much better, dude. Because these games are running in like 480p, okay? So if they're literally doubling the resolution, that is fantastic. And all of the older games having like game reset or offline versus, like normal versus mode. Oh, dude, that is huge. That shit is huge. I'm watching this again. Hold on. There is no reason. So the biggest change in here, no kidding. I don't think they've added a direct like actual rematch to MVC2. They added like offline versus, right? So you can make that process a bit quicker. But this is a big one right here. This is huge. This collection only had really one substantial blight, okay? Why is this a big deal? There are many different versions of X-Men vs. Street Fighter. The game got balanced several times over its arcade run, and the versions of the game that eventually made it to consoles like Sega Saturn, PlayStation doesn't really count, were also like sort of later versions of the game in some way, like landing in between. However, there were some of the earlier ones where a lot of the infinites were a bit easier, the fun factor of the game sort of more free-flowing and open, which was the competitive standard of X-Men vs. Street Fighter. And no shit, the X-Men VSF community was bummed that one of the last versions, pretty much I think it was the last version of X-Men VSF was being used, which was just like one of the least fun versions of the game. A lot of things are just harder to do. And it was mostly the fact that, dude, there was like 3 versions of X-Men vs. Street Fighter. There was multiple versions that you could have played, and they chose the last updated one. Understandable, because clearly they would give you the last updated version. But of all the fighting games that were in here, MVC1, MVC2, like all this stuff, the only game that had that many crazy substantial changes was, no kidding, X-Men vs. Street Fighter. So it was a blight. It was like, okay, yeah, we get X-Men VSF, but it's not the X-Men VSF that the community has been playing historically for 20 years, much less the one that everyone kind of like likes the most. And holy shit, dude, they actually listened. They went in here and put in all the other versions. I do not believe it. There is no reason for them to have done this. There's literally none. I mean, I get it. They're improving the quality of stuff in Capcom Fighting Collection 2, which is, I think, what sparked this on, higher resolution, all this other shit. But my God, man, you did not have to. Like, they did not. And this is easily one of the things that was the biggest issue of this collection. It is no longer an issue. Now you have every version of X-Men vs. Street Fighter and all the other games. That's nuts. That's crazy, dude. They're not really highlighting how substantial some of these changes are, like, but it's a very different game. So, change the resolution for MVC2 Nature Heroes. Increase graphics quality for smoother visuals. Yes. So this was one of the big criticisms that I had at the start, was that, okay, so this is the first time we're porting like a Dreamcast arcade game, like, or a, you know, quote unquote Naomi game to consoles in some way. But they're doing straight native transfer, right? So these games are rendered in like 480p approximately. And that still looks decent, but obviously like mad aliasing. The backgrounds are not smoothed out. Even in the MVC2 re-release back in like 2009 or so, when that thing came out, that did have upscaled graphics. They did smooth out the backgrounds of characters and stuff to make it look like a bit better. And they also like widescreened it. There's a lot of visual quality of life things, even though some of them came with some bugs. So it was weird that, okay, we're sort of regressing in this port of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It doesn't look quite as good, but it plays a lot better. It doesn't have some of like the funky visual fidelity things that the old MVC2 collection or MVC2 port had. But clearly, dude, you're looking at the 3D backgrounds. The pixel art's fine because it's pixel art. But you look at the 3D backgrounds and I'm like, damn, that is low res AF, dude. And the fact that it isn't just this game in this collection, they're talking about it for the games in the big collection that's about to come out, because it has a ton of Dreamcast games in it, a ton of 3D assets, a ton of 3D elements. Dude, those backgrounds would have looked rough. Like Power Stone 1 and 2 would have looked rough if we stick it to native, and that won't be the case. That's so much better. It's so much better. It's so much better, man. God damn. Twice the resolution. Play versus mode in all fighting titles to your heart's content. So, yeah, who gives a shit? No versus mode, right? Who gives a shit about this? So the problem is that all of these games are ROMs. They're arcade versions. Do arcades have natural versus modes? They don't, right? The issue with them not picking up on console versions of games, even though the console ports kind of sucked around all these games, right? Comparatively speaking, for many of them, not all of them, is that there is no versus mode. The versus mode is a quarter goes into the machine and a player jumps in on player 2. Here comes a new challenger type of thing, right? Yeah, okay, so if you're playing offline, you still have to treat every single game like it's an arcade game. The next person just has to press, start on player 2, which puts the coin in, activates the ROM, and there you go. It was like they didn't want to touch any of the functionality of the ROMs and stuff, but they did give us some kind of cool things where if you return back to the character select screen, it keeps the position of your icons and stuff like that on some games to make the rematch process like sort of quicker. So they did something in here where we no longer have to like make a save state at the character select screen to go back to it. Like, no, apparently now there is a actual versus mode for this shit. And here's the kind of thing. There's victory conditions. You can enable the special move stuff. This is offline, by the way. This says right behind my head, it says offline versus. But I get it, but that's important because these ports of these games, even when they're played in tournament, were kind of cumbersome because of the arcade aspect. And now if you just want to play them at home, you don't have to go through all the arcadiness of like the menu and the process of it. You can just like play somebody first to 3, first to 10, and then it's done. That's so much. It's so much better. We used to have to make save states, dude. Even on like the character select screen. And if this is all stuff that is being added, dude, if this is all stuff that's being added, this is nice. You can reset the game now. That's nice. You don't have to go to the menu and kill it. If this is stuff that's all being considered for Fighting Collection 2, that's so much better. It's so much better. How? They got Shinkiro to do new Marvel vs. Capcom art and you refuse to show me? You're not showing me? What? I'm confused on this. New Captain America theme. Groove Out to Remix is a classic songs by Cap Jams from the Capcom theme. Is this bonus? Is this new? New Jin theme? New Captain Commando theme? Cyclops? What? I need to listen to this shit, dude. This game is getting updated? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. There's no reason they didn't need to. Yeah, man. Okay. All right. We all have a reason to jump back into the collection, bro. We all have a really good one. I remember I tried to jump into the Xbox version and it just didn't work out for me. I couldn't get matches for some reason. I'm like, what the hell is going on in like the ranked and shit? We get to jump back in with all this shit, man. I am legit hell happy. I cannot believe they did this shit. You did not need to. You did not need to.
That's cool. I don't have the collection, so I might get it when it's on sale.
this very day, the NES release of TMNT boggles the minds of a vast majority of the fanbase. There's a great deal of mystery and lore locked away deep within the game files. Pulling source material from both the OG Mirage comics as well as the 1987 animated series, a combination of two canons blended together along with a ragtag group of mutant outcasts will leave you questioning just what exactly this is you're playing. The further you venture down this rabbit hole, the crazier shit becomes. Hell, the box art alone speaks to you in riddles. Discovering the full illustration paints a far bigger picture, unfolding to a climactic battle between our teenage turtles and an invading Utron army, indicating that these events occurred during an unspecified period within the Mirage timeline. Yet shockingly, there's no trace of the Utrons, or Krang for that matter, in the game. This particular art piece would eventually make its way onto the cover of Mirage Comics, issue number 4. However, for advertisement purposes, it's a questionable choice to go with, making these stored events far more puzzling moving forward. You begin to notice that many of the in-game assets feel out of place as if they were pre-existing concepts at one time, leaving the turtles feeling like a mere afterthought. There's Mousers and Foot Clan members lurking throughout, but they just feel out of place in comparison to their many new colleagues. Doing a bit of digging, you will find this was common practice on the NES. The first example that comes to mind being Capcom's Yoooo, where localization stateside was drastically altered from its Famicom counterpart, receiving an audio and visual overhaul along with the Sweet Domino's Pizza campaign that featured this tiny red abomination. This would be a reoccurring trend throughout the 80s, well into the 90s, passing a beloved franchise entry off as something it's clearly not. Circling back around to the Turtles, the Famicom release gives us our very first clue from the start, as the Fami title translates to Legend of the Radical Ninja Turtles, which could arguably make the case that many of these character designs and locations depicted throughout the final build were well established before the Turtles found their way onto the scene. So, still not convinced, huh? Need more proof? Well, things only get more bizarre when taking a closer look at the Famicom manual. On the surface, it's the quintessential turtle story. Shredder is hell-bent on ending the turtles once and for all, leading his Foot Clan into a future where their master rules with an iron fist. In the NES canon, Shredder harnesses the power of the Life Transformer gun. For whom or what he uses it on isn't specifically detailed. I'm assuming it ties into the origin story of Splinter and the Turtles. It's essentially the equivalent of the retro mutagen ray gun, only in this timeline, it's capable of returning Splinter to his human form. Speaking of Splinter, he apparently has a daughter going by the name April. Wait, you mean April as in the April? April O'Neil? Well, yeah, in fact, this entire plot revolves around the Shredder making Splinter's life a living hell, now charged with turning his age-old rival into a sewer-dwelling rat, only to further succeed in abducting his daughter shortly after. In this timeline, Shredder dons his infamous red Foot Clan attire, accompanied by his old Mirage fraternity brothers. He's further aided by the all-new Bebop and Rocksteady of the animated series. Essentially, we are in the Turtles multiverse here, folks, and things get even more batshit crazy the moment you discover the many new mutants that roam these sewers. They're quite otherworldly, as if they too found some sort of way to cross over to these unparalleled events. Regardless of these circumstances, the Turtles jump into action, hot on the heels of the Shredhead, looking to rescue April and put an end to the Foot Clan, whom are currently running amok through the windy streets of New York City. Although the world of the Turtles may have been flipped on its head, the execution throughout this 8-bit venture is every bit up to snuff. This is Konami, by the way, and if you grew up prior to the era of fecal-filled game reviews, you're gonna discover quickly that with or without the Turtles license attached here, this was quite an ambitious title for the NES in '89. They can try the shit on this all they want, but the fact of the matter is, the NES release of TMNT was box office, hitting the charts running from the jump off. Strap yourselves in, because there's a lot to unpack with this one, but first, we gotta figure out what our 4 Turtle Boys are packing for the ride ahead as we venture into a brand new world. The gameplay of NES Turtles treats us to a well-balanced breakfast to keep us energized throughout, opening to an immersive 8-bit overhead perspective of the main streets of New York, now yours to explore freely. You'll quickly discover manholes which lead you below, or buildings that double as undercover operations for the Foot. These are your traditional side-scrolling areas that you'll spend a good portion of your journey in. As you roam these various locations, you're given the option to choose one of our 4 hero turtles, each equipped with their signature weapon that, for better or worse, have unique parameters further differentiated by the 4 brothers' primary attributes. Your adventure begins with Leonardo, but you'll soon be shuffling between your three brothers, deciding who's got the right tools to get the job done. While making this decision, you're treated to an overworld map, along with your trusty turtle comm, to reach out to our senpai Splinter, whom pops in on occasion to drop some knowledge on his pupils, aiding their transit across the many scenarios. Each turtle by default rocks their signature weapon, yet the overall speed, strength, and range attached to their individual attributes makes them vital for the many situations presented. Leo is the most balanced of the four. His dual katana blades grants him significant range and power to get you through those high traffic areas where you can easily get overwhelmed with a simple misstep. Raph, in comparison, relies on his sheer speed to deliver a rushdown offense to offset his limited range. Donatello's heavy bow staff makes him the real star of the show. There's nothing he can't master due to his sheer reach and power. The game should just be called Donatello Does Machines, because he literally does so, wrecking anything that draws near his personal bubble. All jokes aside, the real sleeper here is Michelangelo. He's got a solid mid-range game, sporting his chucks, yet what truly sets him apart from the rest of the pack is his courage in combat, dealing significantly more damage the further his health falls towards a critical low. He's not just a party dude, he's the heart and soul of this team. In fact, if you didn't read the manual, you probably would never know about the secret quality he possesses. However, the real meat and potatoes of your arsenal lies in the many sub-weapons you discover throughout your travels. These are acquired in combat, taking out the dreaded Foot Clan, along with the many mutated menaces that resides inside the city. For starters, we have the Shurikens, you know, those tiny throwing stars that come bundled with your TMNT figures many moons ago. Well, they can be thrown in succession to slice and dice the many freaks and geeks that rummage these streets. They're okay, I guess, but what you really want to find down in those murky waters is the triple shot. You don't come across them too often, but when you do, it's like upgrading that little pea shooter in Contra to the ever so nasty spread shot. Only instead of firing those giant red paintballs, you're delivering a fury of 5-star chops to the head. There's also the boomerang that can be thrown in succession for some back and forth banter, quickly catching a pack of sewer rats off guard. There's also turtle-themed icons that put you in your cowabunga feels, granting you temporary invincibility as you climb back into your shell, plowing through a horde of enemies like a green wrecking ball. Yet, the holy grail of pickups is none other than the scroll. These will show up towards the second half of the game, so when they do, be sure to stack up as much as you can. These are your meal ticket to victory, and are exceptionally beneficial for your turtles with short-range attacks. The scroll sends a crescent-shaped wave across the screen, eliminating anything in contact with it. It's by far your strongest sub-weapon, and one that will be crucial for a very specific hallway that we'll get to. If these radical sub-weapons just don't cut it, and you're still finding yourself in a world of trouble, there's plenty of pizzas scattered throughout the world that will restore your health. Here, you can order pizza by the slice, which recovers 2 bars of health, or chow down on a half, or better yet, even a whole ass pie if needed. You can also leave an area discovering another cheesy offering ready to be served up. So for those with the constant complaints, I ask you, is it really that unfair, or did someone place that warning in your ear?
I never hated it.
With April in the clutches of the Foot Clan, the Turtles
I never hated the game. I thought AVGN's review was funny, but I know it was just a skit, and I didn't take it seriously. It's not a bad game. It's a difficult and challenging game. It doesn't suck. It doesn't suck at all.
Soldiers lurk close by, slithering about the sewers as if this radioactive sewage has gotten the best of them. The manholes
It's one of the best NES games.
Your primary access points to the underground, made up of interconnected systems.
I like it better than
in order to progress. As you
the second one.
them, you soon realize
I think the second one's overrated. I think that's a shitty port. I did never like it that much as a kid. I liked playing the one at the arcade more.
If not careful, creating the illusion of an underground infestation. However, with the right equipment, you can clear these sewers with ease. The game sort of throws you right into the line of fire, so you're gonna need to adapt quickly as Bebop and Rocksteady await close by. As you continue your journey below, you're quickly blindsided by Bebop, rushing in headfirst to knock you in the next week. He charges back and forth, pausing momentarily for a quick scrapping. Here, you can dart your blade or bow directly down atop the noggin, evading each flurry of punches till you execute a fatal blow. Putting this warthog away early leaves Rocksteady retreating with April uptown, where you now must continue in pursuit. As you continue trekking through these sewers, the enemies get more and more aggressive. I'm not sure if the waste runoff is polluting the water system, but you got some real ones dwelling in these parts. You got hobos with chainsaws high as a kite, dudes performing fellatio on themselves,
Oh shit.
dudes with pyro, setting the sewers on fire, looking to make a name for themselves. There's warehouses around the city that house more of the crazies. There's these Jeepers Creepers-esque daddy longlegs looking to scoop you up, while Dorito bandits rummage the halls, running up on you.
Dorito
and your boys
bandits.
go way back. Many of these warehouses and tunnels may lead to dead ends. However, why I find they're worth a visit is the assortment of sub-weapons and personal pan pizzas hidden inside that replenish your health while stacking up your inventory going into the later half of the stage. You eventually get tipped off to Rocksteady's location. Now residing in a local warehouse, he will drop in for a surprise attack, looking to make short change of our green machines. He can easily rack up a large amount of damage in a short amount of time, firing off his machine gun head first with a supercharged tackle. Pivot back and forth with your best turtle equipped for the job. With enough distance, you can stagger the brute long enough to put him away. And yes, I could absolutely be a cheap bitch and strike him down with Donnie, but what fun is that, unless that is, you can't beat him straight up. As the turtles reunite with April, they quickly discover the Foot are now planning to destroy the local dam. You will need to climb to the very top in order to find access. This will require you to maneuver across some tight platforming segments inside the exterior. You'll be hot-footing it across the many steel support beams, climbing higher until you reach the upper hatches. Eventually, you'll be taking a dip down into the river below, now tasked with disarming the many explosives that are scheduled to go off at any moment now. No pressure, guys. We only have a little over 2 minutes to disarm them. Everything at the sea floor is shocking to the touch, right down to the beautiful fluorescent seaweed that will pull you down below. This underwater segment is the infamous make or break point for many first-timers. I would love to say there's a simple strategy here, but a good portion of this is trial and error, optimizing your route of travel while learning where each explosive is located beneath. The biggest challenge we face is the electrical algae fields that will shell-shock our turtles to the core. It zaps your health in rapid succession, so if you don't switch your turtle in timely fashion, you aren't pulling this off. I've learned many different strats over the years. Some players even swim directly to the ending point first and work their way back, losing a turtle or two. It's entirely up to you when it comes to the approach, but it's absolutely doable, and after years of experimenting, I can navigate through on one turtle alone. It's just gonna take time to memorize. Saving the dam distracts the turtles long enough for Shredder to make a move on a now vulnerable Splinter. As the turtles arrive home from a hard day on the job, they arrive to a ransacked bachelor pad with the TV set to the Shredder, now addressing the turtles with his latest demands. He proceeds to throw out a challenge. Meet the Foot Clan in downtown.
Listen, Shredder, listen to me. Turtles gotta get all these 3 things for me.
Busting down doors and whooping ass to get answers. The stage is chock full of foot dozers and barricades to throw you off the Shredder scent. You go into Dick Tracy mode here, going from building to building, busting some fiendish foot, and taking names. It's vital to locate key items buried within these buildings to further progress. Missiles will
Get that
be required
fiendish
to
foot.
blast through the
What?
highway
What?
barricades,
What?
blocking the roads
What?
ahead, while
What?
ropes will be acquired for those tightrope segments across each rooftop. This is one of the most creative stages by far, and something I wouldn't really appreciate from a game series until years later. It's really remarkable how Konami managed to incorporate in this sense of open-ended exploration across many of their early works on the NES. With some detective work, you locate the correct rooftop where Splinter is being held captive by a mysterious turtle doppelganger. Is it Slash? No, not quite. Whatever this thing is, it replicates the movement pattern of whichever turtle you have selected. And
Save Dad.
Is some sort of advanced robotics. With enough damage, he sheds his skin, revealing an endoskeleton beneath, now hovering about, slashing away at our turtles. He will innately begin launching a variety of projectiles from his center torso. Remember when I mentioned to stock up on those lovely scrolls? Well, they will save you some time here, slicing right through this metallic coating like butter. With Splinter rescued, there's only one thing left to do. Follow that chopper, as Shredder looks to make his grand escape back to the Technodrome for a climactic showdown. Reaching the old Chrome Dome won't be an easy one. We gotta now journey to the airport where the turtle blimp awaits. These runways will test your knowledge thus far. Each segment houses a different terminal connected by an underground system. We now venture below once more, following along the order of numerical passage that leads us throughout. These underground structures have been overrun with foot infantry conducting some illegal activities. These segments are like the precursor to those dreaded Kaizo Mario games. Each section is covered in conveyor belts and death traps that are gonna put your patience to the test. It's not just maneuvering across them that's a bitch, it's the constant directional switching of the belts, combined with the many armed turrets that fire about. To make matters worse, the real freaks come out at night, hopping around like they're on that good purple stuff, just working it up all over the damn place. The walls around you will also give chase, lining the room with spikes, and what's this, a pizza? Yeah, pizza, in hopes that you will be gullible enough to go for it. It's here the stage goes off the rails, and you can.
This is one of the best.
If you're easily rage baited.
I don't even know if I want to call this a review. It's just so good.
Pizza to replenish your health.
In
the event your turtle bites the big one, you're still able to recover him. Yeah, turns out he's okay after all, wounded and tied up in a specific location where you can ultimately rescue him. As you find your way to your terminal, the entrance is blocked by a massive mouser. This is the mother of all mousers too, spitting out some
That's a
like a good Mega Man baddie. The battle is merely a reward for the shit show you just went through. Standing front and center of this beast will find you shutting its trap before it can even manage to open it, blowing its head clean off. Taking back the airport, we board the turtle blimp, soaring high into the skies, looking to locate the Foot Clan's new base of operations. Waiting till nightfall, the turtles sneak into the Foot's not-so-highly surveillance campground, filled with enemy planes sniffing out intruders. The goal is to locate the access point of the Technodrome. The only problem, though, is that it's constantly on the move, changing with each playthrough taken. You will quickly discover the portal to Dimension X is wide open here, as the creatures that dwell in these parts aren't anything like what you've witnessed before. These creatures are extremely difficult, and you will need to have enough firepower stacked up to clear a path ahead. The issue with NES Turtles is that backtracking constantly punishes the player, as spawn rates will continue to multiply. If you hesitate, you're gonna sink quick. If you don't manage to find the Technodrome on your first attempt, try making a pit stop in the nearby warehouses. They house pizza to restore your turtle's health. If you manage to locate the Technodrome, you gotta be in it to win it. As it rolls on in, duck below to clear the electrical generator mounted along the front frame. Sneaking on past it will find you battling across the steel frame, evading the dual turrets mounted along the dome, while foot infantry deploy from the interior hatches. Dismantle the mounted turrets as soon as possible, giving you a clear shot to take out the eye. As it opens momentarily, clear each wave of foot infantry, then go back on offense. Slash away repeatedly, and in time, you will blow a hole in the top, where you can now descend inside, where Shredder awaits, deep within the control center. The inside of the Technodrome is no joke. It's every bit as menacing as you imagined, especially if you spawn the wrong enemy cycle. The Technodrome is made up of 3 security sectors, which will need to be breached to reach the center. Each section has a unique scenario that presents, filled with tight corridors that find you backtracking from several dead ends, often leaving you cornered by a wave of mutations. There's a few ways to travel each segment, but ultimately, you need to take the most efficient route to preserve your health, as each area is laced with traps. Wall turrets track your motion to pick you off, and enemies will deal far greater damage the deeper you venture, so don't slip up. The final section of the Technodrome is the notorious Hallway of Hell, lined with rocket men that are by far the strongest enemies. They hover about, eviscerating you with each particle wave fired. This is where our scrolls will quickly come in handy. The trick I discovered is pushing them back while firing off your scrolls. If you can time each jump with perfect upward trajectory, you can trigger them to fall back long enough to despawn them off screen. This is the best strat I managed to pull off to clear a path ahead. As you continue pushing forward, this hallway becomes more and more narrow till you have marginal room for error, eventually leading you to a final confrontation with Shredder. As you enter the control room, a ray of light strikes the chamber, as Shredder now materializes, revealing his latest weapon of war, the Transformer Gun. Shredder's large stature towers over you, with his primary attack being his transformation gun. Yep, that's right. He isn't planning to use any swordplay here, or even take a subtle swipe with those steel claws. That's when you soon realize Shredder didn't plan for this fight, whooping that ass all around the center of the Technodrome. He quickly succumbs to the punishment, bursting into flames with his transformation gun in hand. When Splinter's device is destroyed, the curse placed upon Splinter is lifted, transforming our sensei back into his youthful human state. Not sure if this is the same Hamato Yoshi of old, or how the turtles even managed to pull this one off, but rest assured, the day is saved, and with it comes a celebration the only way we know how, with a cheesy, fresh pizza right out the oven. The NES release of TMNT was quite ambitious for its time. The series was just kicking off, yet Konami managed to take the very best from its early works and piece together a worthy franchise first, allowing players to take full advantage of our heroes in a half-shell for the very first time. Konami capitalized on the moment, utilizing this all-new Nintendo Entertainment System to its fullest. Each stage presented fans with unique gameplay mechanics, along with a wide assortment of cleverly crafted sub-weapons to further complement each of our 4 turtle strengths. Whether or not plans were in place for this title prior to the adaptation of the TMNT license, it doesn't take away from the brilliance in the underlying framework. The turtles adopted to each new setting as if it was indeed their own, discovering a slew of new mutant populations. Although these creations are a tad unorthodox in the grand scheme of things, the body of work that surrounds them gives these renditions of the turtles and their cast a unique style. A major reason the turtles continue to find relevancy is through the many renditions of our heroes throughout the years, allowing each generation of fan to find new ways to identify with their favorite turtle. These reimagined enemies and environments had just that, and although these designs are of Konami's own craft, I would love to see them return in some fashion. Except for these assholes, they can stay the hell in Dimension X. The learning curve here is beyond fair, with an exceptional amount of item pickups and personal pan pizzas to keep you chugging along. That is, if you take the time and search them out, rewarding you for exploration, not just giving handouts. The entire adventure is filled with tiny episodic moments, captured through tiny cutscenes and unique scenarios that constantly switches up the playstyles, keeping you on your turtle toes until the very end, deep inside the Technodrome. I encourage anyone jaded by this as a kid to pick it up and give it another go. I think with some patience, you will find that there is a great deal of substance buried within. It's putting the time and effort into it that will find you truly appreciating it by the end. With our very first turtle adventure coming to a close, it's time to really kick things up a notch. And what better way than to take a trip back to the arcade scene, cashing in some of that recent hard-earned dough for a handful of tokens, looking for a taste of that all-new smash hit everyone's raving about. None other than TMNT the arcade game. See you there, gang.
That was cool. It's a lot I didn't know about the old Ninja Turtles on the NES. I kind of want to play it again. I'll have to try out that re-release.
Streamline the New York's bridge. Would you like to look
The Marriott World Trade
urban? Streamline the New York's bridge. Would you like to look
The Marriott World Trade
urban move?
Saudi national
Conspiracy theory. They could collapse.
Hi everyone, I'm not dead. Well, not yet. It's been roughly 2.5 years since I first started work on the 9/11 iceberg chart video, and in that time, I've gotten a lot better at doing research. My previous attempt at making a corrections-style video was more of an FAQ with random comments I kept getting, but it only really isolated a couple common arguments. There are a lot more inaccuracies and misleading statements in my own video than I was aware of at that time, certainly more than I addressed. So now, in the interest of presenting the most accurate information to you, here's a long and rambling diatribe about every little detail I got wrong, organized for your viewing pleasure. To start off with, here are things I wish I would have done differently. I wish I had gone into more details about the amenities and other facilities of the World Trade Center complex as a whole, like the hotel, the restaurant, the open-air observation deck, the telecommunications facilities, the mall, the subway. I wish I had gone into more detail about the actual planes themselves. I stated that they were Boeing 767 and 757s respectively, but I could have gotten a lot more specific. How large they were, how many passengers they could hold, how much fuel it could hold, the aviation number, all of that stuff. I wish I had dubbed over the number of United Airlines 175 videos with a text-to-speech voice or something, instead of using the Bill and Ted clip. In trying to draw attention to the change, it just ruined the tone of the whole segment. I wish I had explained more about the culture of Islamic fundamentalism in the 90s and bin Laden's motivations, which is actually a huge chunk of the 9/11 Commission report. Chapter 2 is entirely devoted to setting up what Islam is, what an Islamic fundamentalist believes, the socio-political context of the Middle East in the 20th century, and bin Laden's justifications for his actions. I wish I had gone deeper into the long and meandering trial of KSM, switching from military tribunal to public court case, back to military tribunal, all the plea deals that were taken on and off the table, the ridiculous amount of times his trial has been delayed. I actually counted how many times the DoD sent out an invitation to the press for pre-trial hearings in just 2024 alone, and they changed the date 5 times. I wish I had gone into much more detail about the war on terror, the Iraq War, George W. Bush's presidency, the Patriot Act, public opinion of the war, but I knew that was way too big a topic for a 20-something-year-old YouTuber to do justice. Maybe in the future I can talk about other individualized aspects of the war on terror, more so on the political media side rather than the front lines. I wish I didn't accuse Rob Lowe of being a racist with no evidence. I'm sorry, Rob Lowe. I didn't mean it. It was meant as a joke. I wish I had explained my reasonings for debunking the controlled demolition argument in a more neutral and less snarky way. The more familiar you become with the topic, especially one as divisive as, say, 9/11, the more repetitive the arguments can get on either side, and the more exasperated one can become when hearing the same points being discussed, picked apart, or proven untrue over and over and over again. But if you get exasperated, that can definitely drive away people that are looking for an honest and open discussion. I wish I had shown better images of the damage to the side of World Trade Center 7 because they do exist. I was just worse at doing an image search back then. I wish I hadn't called Trump an architect when he was just a real estate mogul. I wish I didn't give Omar al-Bayoumi the benefit of the doubt knowing what we know now. We'll get into that later. Don't worry about that. I wish I hadn't gone into that side tangent about the Lego 9/11 video and the LOL Superman segment because ultimately it was a lead that went nowhere. It was proven that the first mention of LOL Superman was made before that comment was left on the video, so it's completely irrelevant. I wish I had went into many more individual examples of both entertainment impact and predictive programming, because there are a ton of examples. Weird ones, interesting ones, and ones that are, well, silly. Yeah, silly. That's the word I'll use. Okay, here are topics I now wish I had mentioned, but didn't. World Trade Center art, gelatin, E-Team. Basically talking about all the sculpture work around the towers. I remember seeing these weird guys pop up a lot in conspiracy videos, and I always used to think that they were used for security checkpoints in some way. I don't know why I thought that, but they were actually made for the Quebec, New York 2001 exhibition, which obviously had to be postponed. The group Gelatin tried to take portraits of people in the towers by flying around it in a helicopter, and the E-Team lit up their name in the building's own lights right at the spot where American 11 struck. Again, there are more in-depth videos to check out on that. Lost phone calls. What we've heard from the towers themselves is just a fragment of the actual recordings, and those are just fractions themselves of the amount of calls really made. Most calls made to 911 or from the towers or from air phones were never recorded and only exist via witness testimony. Mark Bingham's call from Flight 93 to his family would never have been publicly known about if his mom hadn't related the story to news outlets. Speaking of witness testimony, we're fucking dying. Okay, so I'll be as quick as I possibly can. Basically, at 9:27 on NBC, they reported this.
A person who answered the phone on the trading floor at interdealer broker Cantor Fitzgerald, located near the top of the World Trade Center, said, "We're blanking dying," when asked what was happening, and hung up. There was screaming and yelling in the background, and a follow-up call was not answered.
Cantor Fitzgerald was located between floors 101 and 105 of the World Trade Center, so those employees all unfortunately died because they had no way to descend past the 99th floor. No single person has been identified as answering this call, and this NBC clip and a Reuters news report, which I think was the origin of the claim, are the only two agencies to cover this story. Cockpit voice recordings. Cockpit voice recordings, or CVRs, are made by a plane's black box. American 11 and United 175 had their CVRs completely destroyed by the collapse of the towers, and American 77's was salvaged but unusable, meaning that United 93 is the only plane used on 9/11 whose CVR exists in full. And yet still, it hasn't been released. It was used as evidence in the trial of Zacharias Moussaoui in 2006, but the FBI barred it from being declassified, only allowing a transcript to be made publicly. Some brief snippets have been showcased in various odd places, such as a YouTube video tribute to 9/11 posted by the FBI themselves. But in March of 2023, a user on Reddit named Bun39 posted the response they had been given by the FBI to a Freedom of Information Act request she submitted for the CVR tapes. The FBI said they had found about 81 minutes of audio relevant to the request, but could only release it in 30-minute increments made on CDs that would be shipped within 55 months.
What?
By the time the last disc will have been delivered to Bun39, it will be 2027. I don't even have to explain
That
how
is so
ridiculous that
fucking
is, right?
weird.
Loose change. One of the first
They have
big documentaries about 9/11.
all this audio, and they're releasing it so slowly on fucking CDs. That's how fucking crazy the fucking government is. How fucked up they are. They have their own intentions for shit. And that's the thing that's like the most scariest about them. That's why they just can't just fucking give this person this fucking goddamn
conspiracy theories, directed by Dylan Avery, who we saw in the Barry Jennings segment. It was pretty influential. By first real ridiculous 9, it will be 2027. The FBI said odd places, and United 175 of the World Trade Center, so those employees all unfortunately died because they had no way to descend past the 99th floor. No single person has been identified as answering this call, and this NBC clip and a Reuters news report, which I think was the origin of the claim, are the only two agencies to cover this story. Cockpit voice recordings. Cockpit voice recordings, or CVRs, are made by a plane's black box. American 11 and United 175 had their CVRs completely destroyed by the collapse of the towers, and American 77's was salvaged but unusable, meaning that United 93 is the only plane used on 9/11 whose CVR exists in full. And yet still, it hasn't been released. It was used as evidence in the trial of Zacharias Moussaoui in 2006, but the FBI barred it from being declassified, only allowing a transcript to be made publicly. Some brief snippets have been showcased in various odd places, such as a YouTube video tribute to 9/11 posted by the FBI themselves. But in March of 2023, a user on Reddit named Bun39 posted the response they had been given by the FBI to a Freedom of Information Act request she submitted for the CVR tapes. The FBI said they had found about 81 minutes of audio relevant to the request, but could only release it in 30-minute increments made on CDs that would be shipped within 55 months. By the time the last disc will have been delivered to Bun39, it will be 2027. I don't even have to explain how ridiculous that is, right? Loose Change. One of the first real big documentaries about 9/11 conspiracy theories, directed by Dylan Avery, who we saw in the Barry Jennings segment. It was pretty influential for its time in the mid-2000s, but it has not aged well. It has 6 different edits, cuts, versions, whatever you want to call them, and I actually recommend you watch all of them, because it becomes pretty apparent what things are complete bullshit when he has to keep cutting them out of his films and changing the story. Marvin Bush connection. Marvin Bush is George W.'s brother. He's done a bunch of things, but between 1993 and 2000, he was on the board of directors for a company called Securacom. Also in 1993, the Port Authority made a deal with Securacom as part of their multi-million-dollar plan to improve security on the towers after the bombing. This meant anything from diagnostics to installation of security cameras to the rental of armored vehicles. 9/11 Commission. Why did I not talk about the people who got all the info I've been using this whole time? I really can't do it justice in a few seconds. First, read the commission yourself. Get your own opinions on it. Go to the library and get a copy. Read all of the notes. There are like 100 or so pages of notes. Read all of the notes. And then read Without Precedent by the co-chairman of the commission itself. That book explains all the behind the scenes, all the bullshit from the FAA and the executive branch that these guys had to put up with. It's very enlightening, and in my mind it destroys the idea of an official narrative, because how official can it be if the government was actively sabotaging its creation?
Mr. Bush conditioned his cooperation on stipulations that range from the questionable to the ridiculous.
Under the agreement, only certain members of the commission will be allowed to review classified documents from the White House, and their notes will be subject to administration review.
Don't you think that the families deserve to have a transcript or to be able to see what you
Adam,
said?
you asked me that question yesterday.
Ramzi Youssef. I said in the original video during the KSM segment that we would come back to him later, and then I forgot.
I'm sorry.
Youssef was the one responsible for creating and planting the car bombs that exploded in the World Trade Center parking garage on February 26, 1993, killing 6 people and injuring 1,000 more. He took credit directly for the attack in a letter he sent to the New York Times that also outlined his motivations. Youssef was also responsible for planting a bomb in the bathroom of Philippine Airlines Flight 434 that detonated a few hours later, which was discovered to be a test run for the Bajinka plot. As you may remember from the 9/11 iceberg chart, that plan was halted and Youssef was arrested. Later on in custody, he'd place a phone call to his uncle, who was also the man who financed both the 93 bombings and the Bajinka plot, the unprosecutable Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Ramzi was then sentenced to life in prison, plus 240 years for seditious conspiracy in 1995. And that is where he is today, in prison.
It's ironic, there's a chilling story. Lou Shalero of the FBI, who was part of the capture of Ramzi Youssef, told me this story that he was flying over the World Trade Center in a helicopter with the suspect next to him after he was captured in Pakistan.
New York just looked beautiful that night. Crystal clear, crisp, lights twinkling, And as, of course, we had him with the hood on. And as we come down the river, we took the hood off,
and as they passed over, Lou Scalero nudged him and said,
I said to him, look straight ahead, see that Ramsey? The trade centers are still standing there, aren't they?
you see, it's still standing. And Ramzi Youssef smiled and said,
in his little accent, he said,
it wouldn't be if I'd had more money.
In other words, more money to buy explosives, more money to run a more efficient operation than the one he ran from New Jersey in '93.
Exactly.
Right up to that moment, the bravado was incredible.
And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm finally going to talk about it. That's right. MCR.
My
did actually
Chemical
do
Romance?
The iceberg chart originally, but the segment was never finished because it was too tonally dissonant from the rest of the video. But anyways, the story goes that Gerard Way was an intern for Cartoon Network in 2001, and while traveling on his way to work taking the ferry from New Jersey to New York, he witnessed 9/11 from the waterway equivalent to front row seats. This had a profound effect on him. It changed the course of his whole life, and he wrote the song Skylines and Turnstiles to cope with these feelings, which would soon become the very first song written for My Chemical Romance. Some have stated Gerard can be seen in photographs taken from New Jersey harbors on that day, but because these individuals can only be seen from the back, it can never be confirmed if these are actually him or not. I'm not even sure if Gerard himself remembers what harbor he was at, or what ferry he took. And now for our feature presentation. Here are things I got wrong. Get out your tapes, kids, because we're going through the VHS version of this video.
The South Tower was struck at approximately 9:02 a.m.
One of the weirdest discrepancies between the 9/11 Commission report and other sources is United 175's exact time of impact. The report states on page 8 that the plane struck the building at exactly 9:03 and 11 seconds, which is sourced from the NTSB flight path study published in 2002. Yet the study itself lists the time as being approximately 9:02 and 40 seconds. The NIST report further muddies the waters by stating the time of crash as 9:02 and 59 seconds, which seems to be the most accurate. Analysis of the seismic data as observed from Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory puts the time of impact at 9:02 and 54 seconds. So, who is right? Where did the Commission get that extra 11 seconds from?
At 9:03 and 2 seconds, United 175 crashed into the South Tower.
And Flight 175 struck at a right-leaning tilt.
That is clearly a left-leaning tilt.
The FBI later confiscated the hotel footage and another tape from a nearby gas station, which has yet to be released to the public.
The tape from the gas station was released, along with many other videos that showed absolutely nothing of note.
It was later discovered that the potential targets of Flight 93 were either going to be the Capitol building or the White House itself.
It has since been mostly agreed upon that the Capitol would have been the target of UA-93 ever since the footage of Omar al-Bayoumi leaked this year.
There are a total of
69
known shots of the second plane.
There are actually 72 known angles now. I covered this mistake previously, but the same YouTube user had his channel deleted, so the channel Erebus911 uploaded an updated version of his compilation.
Where he declared a jihad against the United States for their invasion of Saudi Arabia.
The US didn't literally invade Saudi Arabia. However, it did have a very strong military presence in the country by the time the Soviet-Afghan War was over. In response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, about 643,000 US troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia to protect the country once Operation Desert Shield commenced in 1991. And it was apparent that bin Laden was pissed at the growing Western presence in his country. This is a big crux of his justification for jihad, and he explains it in an important part of his 1997 interview with CNN.
Tapes leaked to the press in November of 2001 showed bin Laden speaking in a way that implies he had foreknowledge of the attacks.
The November 2001 tapes are disputed for their authenticity, not in terms of it being fake, although there are people who believe that, but in the accuracy of the translation done by the State Department. The show Monitor from German TV channel Das Erste brought in 2 independent professional translators
and an Arabist, or professor of Islamic sciences,
and all concluded that there were multiple errors in translation, going so far as to state, at the most important places where it is held to prove the guilt of bin Laden, it is not identical with the Arabic.
Before he was shot point blank in the head where he stood, his body was unceremoniously dumped into the ocean.
There was a ceremony done for bin Laden's burial at sea, which was only done because, according to U.S. officials, no other country would accept his remains. Islamic culture usually requires the dead to be buried in the ground. However, in extraneous circumstances, such as the possibility of the corpse rotting on a ship before it reaches land, burial at sea is permitted. In accordance with tradition, bin Laden's corpse was cleaned, wrapped in a white shroud, and an Arabic funeral prayer was recited before it was slid off the side of the USS Carl Vinson into the North Arabic Sea.
The news ticker at the bottom of the screen on 24-hour news networks like CNN was introduced on 9/11 by Fox News of all networks.
Graphic news tickers overlaid at the bottom of the screen weren't invented by Fox News. The first live graphic overlays of a news ticker were thought to have been in the early 80s by local affiliate stations in the Northeast U.S., who would use it to display school cancellations. Other national cable channels such as CNBC, HLN, ESPN, CNN Financial, and probably some others, developed consistent graphic tickers of their own, though most stations continued to use them only on the off occasion. Having said that, on the morning of September 11th, Fox News was indeed the first national television news channel to introduce a graphic ticker overlay and have it be permanent. Theirs started at 10:49 a.m., barely 20 minutes after the collapse of the North Tower, with CNN following suit at 11:11 a.m. Okay, so Wikipedia states that MSNBC started their news ticker at approximately 2 p.m., and this is what I initially put in my script. But it's not true. In trying to find footage of it, I could not. Here's a clip taken at 5:20 p.m. when World Trade Center 7 collapsed, and as you can see, there's nothing at the bottom of the screen.
No, wait, hold on, scratch that, because there is footage in the afternoon with a news ticker, but it's an hour before Wikipedia says it is, and the news ticker goes away.
This investigation and subsequent report, published in 2004,
I'm conflating two different things here. The 9/11 Commission was formed in 2003 and presented their final report in 2004, which went more into detail about how the attacks were planned, the failure of systems in place to protect Americans, and suggestions for the future. The NIST investigation, started in 2002 and fully completed by 2008, was more concerned with how the buildings themselves collapsed and why they did so, which is why they gathered so much visual evidence for it.
It's estimated that the temperature inside the inferno was close to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit.
According to the NIST report, some floors of the World Trade Center were as hot as 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, though this has been contested by other sources.
Henryk Siwiak.
Editor's note, that is not how you pronounce his name.
That is still not right. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be, but according to the comments, it's much closer to Henryk Siwiak.
To George W. Bush. As
The Bush question was answered by himself in his private testimony before the commission.
The president felt he should project strength and calm until he could better understand what was happening.
And he went into slightly more detail both in a 60 Minutes television special from 2002 and in a documentary from 2011.
I was trying to, obviously at that moment, I realized I was in a unique setting to receive a message that somebody had attacked us. And I was looking at these little children, and all of a sudden we're at war.
I immediately focused on the children and the contrast between the notion of an attack and the innocence of children clarified my job, and that's to protect people. A lot of people would be watching my reactions to this crisis, so I made the decision not to jump up immediately and leave the classroom. I didn't want to rattle the kids. I wanted to project a sense of calm.
$2.3 trillion.
So by 2002, that $2.3 trillion figure had supposedly been reduced to about $700 billion. Still a shockingly high amount of untracked funds, but less than half of what it was before.
An F-16 smashing into a glass building comically labeled with the letters WTC.
This building does exist in real life, and also has a twin. They are the World Trade Center buildings in Brussels, Belgium, and currently they are under renovation to be turned into gentrified touristy stuff.
What the hell?
And closed caption TV footage.
Yeah,
Fake two towers? Are you? Is that what I understand?
As someone who's such a big fan of the final cut, I'm surprised I got that wrong.
On closed circuit TV.
Omar al-Bayoumi.
Since I made that segment on Omar al-Bayoumi, a videotape was unsealed in federal court and leaked to 60 Minutes in June 2024 that was basically just him scouting the Capitol building and the Washington Monument, talking about a plan and promising to, quote, report to you when he gets back there. This all but confirms his at least tacit involvement with some sketchy activity, as the tape was found in his own apartment in Britain by police. Among the other videotapes that were found there was this footage of a party, which I used in my initial video because it was the only other moving footage I had of Omar, not knowing that among that collection of videotapes, this was right here the whole time. Omar himself is believed to be alive and living in Saudi Arabia, but the question still remains. Why now was this footage leaked to the press?
Urban moving and Mossad.
Wait, stop. If we're going to talk about that, we're going to have to talk about this. In my original Part 1, at the end of my discussion on Larry Silverstein and the poet myth, I wanted to bring to attention how I felt a lot of people were hating on him and making up these theories entirely because he's Jewish and an easy scapegoat. I phrased it as a joke.
Also, does anybody else think that Larry Silverstein gets a lot of flack from the conspiracy theory crowd because he's Jewish? No, I'm not saying that that's good, okay? No.
Okay, maybe that wasn't very direct, and trying to make it a joke probably wasn't very tactful. However, I would argue that it's also definitely not fucking hate speech. YouTube, in the middle of its live premiere, which I was not present for because I was asleep, pulled the video because they said I was promoting anti-Semitism. So to make sure I could still keep my video up, I hastily cut out the segment in question, stuck a single frame wall of text in as a protest, and that was that. The additional disclaimer in Part 3 was to just get YouTube off my ass because I had to talk about Jewish politics again, in much more detail this time. So that being said, I already talked about the supposed mural van that the urban moving systems guys were seen driving, and how there didn't seem to be any tangible evidence of its existence. But as it turns out, there is something real to check out here. NYPD radio transmissions recorded by a ham radio operator named Robert Sanford do discuss the mural van and even state its location.
It's a big truck with a mural painted of an airplane diving into New York City and exploding. I don't know what's in the truck. The truck is in between 6th and 7th on King Street.
They're most likely talking about this King Street, located between 6th and 7th Avenue near Soho, nearly 2 miles away from the Trade Center and 10 miles away from where the Israelis were supposedly spotted and arrested. Fears of explosives in the van led to officers calling the bomb squad and the ESU to investigate, and numerous times on the radio, an explosion is mentioned.
Explosives on King. Go in the van exploded. That exploded. Explosion. One of those remote control planes filled with explosives.
The same officer also briefly states something about a remote-controlled plane, which either the officer misspoke and he was referring to the bombs in the van being remote-controlled, or he just rolled with some secondhand information he got from his colleagues. The Minetta Transportation Institute also addressed the mural van in its post 9/11 report on page 20, but ultimately concluded that it was, quote, an innocent delivery truck. What this actually means is unknown, but we do know that urban moving was discovered to be linked to a warehouse that was also a distribution point for Zoom copters. In fact, an article from the Tampa Bay Times from December of 2001 tells the story of young Israelis traveling to the U.S. to work for Quality Sales in Florida, selling various products at kiosks in the mall, including the Zoom copters. Many were subsequently arrested and held in custody for nearly a month before being deported back to Israel, just like the 5 urban moving workers. Could it be that coincidental? Maybe, but there are also some weirder details left over. For instance, the main interviewee for the article, Yaniv Hani, is said to have arrived in the U.S. only 2 days before 9/11. On the other hand, he, along with his fellow Israeli workers, weren't arrested and interrogated until October 30th, nearly a month after 9/11.
Mayor, do you know anything about the report about the possible explosives that were found in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think the police commissioner was able to get information about that. They have confirmed that someone has been stopped in New Jersey, 3 men in a van. However, there was no explosives in the van. All right, they're being held for questioning.
Where in New Jersey?
I can't say yet.
Why were they stopped, and why do you think they're connected with this?
We can't tell at this point. It's between the FBI and the Port Authority. We just got the confirmation by phone after I left the last briefing.
Were they on the George Washington Bridge as they were heading from?
No, they weren't.
Were they in the Meadowlands?
It's my understanding, but we haven't confirmed that.
Do we know why they were stopped?
Not yet.
LOL Superman.
The LOL Superman subreddit was deleted in November of 2024. The video itself still hasn't been found, and a lot of people have begun to suspect that it didn't exist at all.
If this is supposed to imply that the CIA or whoever had bin Laden digitally de-aged, then clearly 9/11 truthers have never heard of hair dye or how it works.
Islamic tradition does actually allow for the dyeing of hair and beards, so long as it's not black for some reason. The video resolution of any surviving clips of bin Laden is way too low and poorly lit to properly identify the exact color of his beard, but it's black or very, very dark, so either I was completely wrong in my theory, or bin Laden was a massive hypocrite who didn't follow proper Muslim practices. Considering he supposedly kept porn downloaded to his computer, at least according to the CIA, that wouldn't be too surprising. And there you go. Everything else I was 100% right on.
It's 8:52.
From television network to
right on.
It's 8:52.
Everything else I was 100% right on.
It's 8:52.
Television network to bring you the latest on this unbelievable, horrific event in American history. 9/11, September 11th, 2001. At this point, you know, you can't rule out a terrorist attack. You can't rule out terrorist suicide, plane bombings, or even a hijacking situation.
Job costing. And it integrates with Microsoft.
For the first time, airport security will become a direct federal responsibility.
The Transportation and Security Administration, or TSA, was created 15 years ago this weekend, just 2 months after the 9/11 attacks. Before that, all passenger screening at airports was handled by private companies. Josh Hirsch met the man whose firm was at the gates during the most catastrophic security breach in history.
This is all reactive shooting.
This shooting game that was going on here, this is your baby, huh?
People, particularly in the security industry, love to shoot things and have fun, so it just draws people. Here's a retired FBI agent. Want to shoot? People in the security industry will say, you know what, your name, I remember your name. I don't remember exactly why I remember your name. Oh, all in the heart. Good shooting, good shooting.
The Frank Argenbright story started 15 years ago, when he went from being the founder of the largest airport security firm in America to a villain.
2000 with $1 billion, 52,000 employees, about 180 airports worldwide, world's largest aviation security company. 9/11 takes place. We don't know what happened. We don't know if it's anything negative about Argenbright.
Argenbright Security employed screeners at Dulles and Newark, where 9/11 hijackers boarded the planes that crashed into the Pentagon and into the field at Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Do you remember where you were on September the 11th?
Sure. I was in my offices in Atlanta Financial Center when they called me and the planes were hitting the tower.
Was there a point when you realized that Argenbright Security might have been involved in it?
A couple days later.
Argenbright screeners were accused of allowing the hijackers onto the planes with box cutters that many believe were used to overpower the crews. Even though it has never been proven that hijackers snuck weapons through airport security, the company soon found itself under federal investigation.
The Department of Justice investigation reveals that Argenbright Holdings has committed new Federal Aviation Administration regulatory violations at 13 airports throughout the United States.
Things got worse after incidents at airports in Chicago and San Francisco in the months after 9/11.
A man carrying 7 knives like these, mace, and a stun gun made it through an Argenbright checkpoint.
Argenbright, the country's largest airport security firm, has been fired at Boston's Logan Airport. The company is accused of sloppy work.
Argenbright is now banned.
Now, I'd sold my company in December 2000.
Argenbright had been bought out a few months before the attacks, and he wasn't allowed to speak on the company's behalf.
I had to say, no comment. I'm getting emails saying, you ought to go to hell, you ought to die in hell. What really broke my heart was the screeners calling me and saying, Mr. Frank, you know what's going on, why don't you tell them what's going on? And I said, I can't say a word.
The backlash hurt his business and his reputation, and for the past 15 years, Argenbright has been working to keep a foothold in the security business. His latest project is another security company that protects celebrities and billionaires and trains corporations to respond to active shooters.
Do you find that things like 9/11, people associate you with that at all?
I always worry about it.
Yeah.
When I tell my story, should I not bring it up? Probably not. But because I'm sensitive to it, I don't want people to think that I'm avoiding it. So I bring it up just to deal with it.
And it's part of your story.
It is sadly part of my story. Yeah. We have this training facility out of Reston, and we train all of our security officers here. And this is just one of the training pieces of equipment that we use.
In his latest business venture, he has a surprising new partner, one of the Navy SEALs who shot Osama bin Laden.
Who's sitting next to you now?
Matt Bissonette, my partner in Tier 1 Security.
Matt Bissonette, better known by his pseudonym Mark Owen, would only be interviewed with his face obscured.
Why are you in the dark, Matt?
Well, if you know anything about my background, I like to fly a little under the radar and out of the limelight. I've written several books. I've used pseudonyms on those books, and I do that for the kind of the public persona, and so I like to be very private.
Is some of it safety related?
Yeah, of course. I've had death threats for writing the book from folks overseas, and I take those as serious as I can.
Bissonette faced public scrutiny after writing a book about the bin Laden raid without seeking Pentagon review.
Was that something that you two talked about that brought you together?
I think a little bit.
I could relate to it, right? I said, look, I know I can relate to what you're dealing with is because I dealt with that. So there's clearly some understanding of how the government works against you if you're a little guy.
Together, they make an odd couple. A man associated with bin Laden's greatest triumph,
Yes, there's a connection there.
and another associated with his death.
What does it mean? I don't know. When the stars start aligning and it makes sense, it makes sense.
You feel the same way? Does it feel surreal ever to think?
It is surreal. I mean, it's just, fate has a way of working things out, right? I believe in fate.
Argenbright thinks that makes them an ideal pair. But there's one area of business he still won't be entering.
Do you ever consider getting back into airport screening?
No, my wife would kill me, I've said that, but I'm not going to go back in the
Why would your wife kill you?
Just all the stuff we went through. I have no interest in doing it. I am not going to do that.
Good. Yeah, obviously something's...
The preface to the 9/11 Commission Report. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sam Stinson. The preface. We present the narrative of this report and the recommendations that flow from it to the President of the United States Congress, and the American people for their consideration. 10 commissioners, 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, chosen by elected leaders from our nation's capital at a time of great partisan division, have come together to present this report without dissent. We have come together with a unity of purpose because our nation demands it. September 11th, 2001 was a day of unprecedented shock and suffering in the history of the United States. The nation was unprepared. How did this happen, and how can we avoid such tragedy again? To answer these questions, the Congress and the President created the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, Public Law 107-306, November 27, 2002. Our mandate was simple. The law directed us to investigate facts and circumstances relating to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, including those relating to intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, diplomacy, immigration issues and border control, the flow of assets to terrorist organizations, commercial aviation, the role of congressional oversight and resource allocation, and other areas determined relevant by the Commission. In pursuing our mandate, we have reviewed more than 2.5 million pages of documents and interviewed more than 1,200 individuals in 10 countries. This included nearly every senior official from the current and previous administrations who had responsibility for topics covered in our mandate. We have sought to be independent, impartial, thorough, and nonpartisan. From the outset, we have been committed to share as much of our investigation as we can with the American people. To that end, we held 19 days of hearings and took public testimony from 160 witnesses. Our aim has not been to assign individual blame. Our aim has been to provide the fullest possible account of the events surrounding 9/11 and to identify lessons learned. We learned about an enemy who is sophisticated, patient, disciplined, and lethal. The enemy rallies broad support in the Arab and Muslim world by demanding redress of political grievances, but its hostility toward us and our values is limitless. Its purpose is to rid the world of religious and political pluralism, the plebiscite, and equal rights for women. It makes no distinction between military and civilian targets. Collateral damage is not in its lexicon. We learned that the institutions charged with protecting our borders, civil aviation, and national security did not understand how grave this threat could be and did not adjust their policies, plans, and practices to deter or defeat it. We learned of fault lines within our government, between foreign and domestic intelligence, and between and within agencies. We learned of the pervasive problems of managing and sharing information across a large and unwieldy government that had been built in a different era to confront different dangers. At the outset of our work, we said we were looking backward in order to look forward. We hope that the terrible losses chronicled in this report can create something positive, an America that is safer, stronger, and wiser. That September day, we came together as a nation. The test before us is to sustain that unity of purpose and meet the challenges now confronting us. We need to design a balanced strategy for the long haul to attack terrorists and prevent their ranks from swelling, while at the same time protecting our country against future attacks. We have been forced to think about the way our government is organized. The massive departments and agencies that prevailed in the great struggles of the 20th century must work together in new ways so that all the instruments of national power can be combined. Congress needs dramatic change as well to strengthen oversight and focus accountability. As we complete our final report, we want to begin by thanking our fellow commissioners, whose dedication to this task has been profound. We have reasoned together over every page, and the report has benefited from this remarkable dialogue. We want to express our considerable respect for the intellect and judgment of our colleagues, as well as our great affection for them. We want to thank the commission staff. The dedicated professional staff, headed by Philip Zelikow, has contributed innumerable hours to the completion of this report, setting aside other important endeavors to take on this all-consuming assignment. They have conducted the exacting investigative work upon which the Commission has built. They have given good advice and faithfully carried out our guidance. They have been superb. We thank the Congress and the President. Executive branch agencies have searched records and produced a multitude of documents for us. We thank officials, past and present, who were generous with their time and provided us with insight. The Pent-Bomb team at the FBI, the Directors Review Group at the CIA, and Inspectors General at the Department of Justice, and the CIA provided great assistance. We owe a huge debt to their investigative labors, painstaking attention to detail, and readiness to share what they have learned. We have built on the work of several previous commissions, and we thank the Congressional Joint Inquiry, whose fine work helped us get started. We thank the City of New York for assistance with documents and witnesses, and the Government Printing Office, and W.W. Norton and Company for helping to get this report to the broad public. We conclude this list of thanks by coming full circle. We thank the families of 9/11, whose persistence and dedication helped create the Commission. They have been with us each step of the way as partners and witnesses. They know, better than any of us, the importance of the work we have undertaken. We want to note what we have done and not done. We have endeavored to provide the most complete account we can of the events of September 11th, what happened and why. This final report is only a summary of what we have done, citing only a fraction of the sources we have consulted. But in an event of this scale, touching so many issues and organizations, we are conscious of our limits. We have not interviewed every knowledgeable person or found every relevant piece of paper. New information inevitably will come to light. We present this report as a foundation for a better understanding of a landmark in the history of our nation. We have listened to scores of overwhelming personal tragedies and astounding acts of heroism and bravery. We have examined the staggering impact of the events of 9/11 on the American people and their amazing resilience and courage as they fought back. We have admired their determination to do their best to prevent another tragedy while preparing to respond if it becomes necessary. We emerge from this investigation with enormous sympathy for the victims and their loved ones, and with enhanced respect for the American people. We recognize the formidable challenges that lie ahead. We also approach the task of recommendations with humility. We have made a limited number of them. We decided consciously to focus on recommendations we believe to be most important, whose implementation can make the greatest difference. We came into this process with strong opinions about what would work. All of us have had to pause, reflect, and sometimes change our minds as we studied these problems and considered the views of others. We hope our report will encourage our fellow citizens to study, reflect, and act. Thomas H. Keene, Chair. Lee H. Hamilton, Vice Chair. End of preface. Chapter 1.1 of the 9/11 Commission Report. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sam Stinson. Chapter 1.1. We have some planes. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, dawned temperate and nearly cloudless in the eastern United States. Millions of men and women readied themselves for work. Some made their way to the Twin Towers, the signature structures of the World Trade Center complex in New York City. Others went to Arlington, Virginia, to the Pentagon. Across the Potomac River, the United States Congress was back in session. At the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, people began to line up for a White House tour. In Sarasota, Florida, President George W. Bush went for an early morning run. For those heading to an airport, weather conditions could not have been better for a safe and pleasant journey. Among the travelers were Muhammad Atta and Abdul Aziz Al-Amari, who arrived at the airport in Portland, Maine. Inside the 4 flights. Boarding the flights. Boston, American 11 and United 175. Atta and Omari boarded a 6 a.m. flight from Portland to Boston's Logan International Airport. When he checked in for his flight to Boston, Atta was selected by a computerized pre-screening system known as CAPS, Computer-Assisted Passenger Pre-Screening System, created to identify passengers who should be subject to special security measures. Under security rules in place at the time, the only consequence of Atta's selection by CAPS was that his checked bags were held off the plane until it was confirmed that he had boarded the aircraft. This did not hinder Atta's plans. Atta and Omari arrived in Boston at 6:45. 7 minutes later, Atta apparently took a call from Marwan al-Shahi, a longtime colleague who was at another terminal at Logan Airport. They spoke for 3 minutes. It would be their final conversation. Between 6:45 and 7:40, Atta and Omari, along with Satam al-Sukami, Wa'il al-Sheri, and Walid al-Sheri, checked in and boarded American Airlines Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles. The flight was scheduled to depart at 7:45. In another Logan terminal, Shehi, joined by Fayez Bani Hamad, Mahand al-Shari, Ahmad al-Ghamdi, and Hamzi al-Ghamdi, checked in for United Airlines Flight 175, also bound for Los Angeles. A couple of Shehi's colleagues were obviously unused to travel. According to the United ticket agent, they had trouble understanding the standard security questions, and she had to go over them slowly until they gave the routine, reassuring answers. Their flight was scheduled to depart at 8. The security checkpoints through which passengers, including Atta and his colleagues, gained access to the American 11 gate were operated by Globe Security under a contract with American Airlines. In a different terminal, the single checkpoint through which passengers for United 175 passed was controlled by United Airlines, which had contracted with Huntley USA to perform the screening. In passing through these checkpoints, each of the hijackers would have been screened by a walk-through metal detector calibrated to detect items with at least the metal content of a .22 caliber handgun. Anyone who might have set off that detector would have been screened with a hand wand, a procedure requiring the screener to identify the metal item or items that caused the alarm. In addition, an X-ray machine would have screened the hijackers' carry-on belongings. The screening was in place to identify and confiscate weapons and other items prohibited from being carried onto a commercial flight. None of the checkpoint supervisors recalled the hijackers or reported anything suspicious regarding their screening. While Atta had been selected by CAPS in Portland, 3 members of his hijacking team, Sukami, Wa'il al-Shari, and Walid al-Shari, were selected in Boston. Their selection affected only the handling of their checked bags, not their screening at the checkpoint. All 5 men cleared the checkpoint and made their way to the gate for American 11. Atta, Amari, and Sukami took their seats in business class, seats 8D, 8G, and 10B respectively. The Sherry brothers had adjacent seats in row 2, Wa'il in 2A, Walid in 2B, in the first class cabin. They boarded American 11 between 7:31 and 7:40. The aircraft pushed back from the gate at 7:40. Shehi and his team, none of whom had been selected by CAPS, boarded United 175 between 7:23 and 7:28. Bani Hamad in 2A, Sherry in 2B, Shehi in 6C, Hamza al-Ghamdi in 9C, and Ahmed al-Ghamdi in 9D. Their aircraft pushed back from the gate just before 8. Washington Dulles, American 77. Hundreds of miles southwest of Boston at Dulles International Airport in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C., 5 more men were preparing to take their early morning flight. At 7:15, a pair of them, Khalid al-Midar and Majid Moked, checked in at the American Airlines ticket counter for Flight 77, bound for Los Angeles. Within the next 20 minutes, they would be followed by Hani Hanjour and 2 brothers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Salim al-Hazmi. Hani Hanjour, Khalid al-Midar, and Majid Moked were flagged by CAPS. The Hazmi brothers were also selected for extra scrutiny by the airline's customer service representative at the check-in counter. He did so because one of the brothers did not have photo identification, nor could he understand English, and because the agent found both of the passengers to be suspicious. The only consequence of their selection was that their checked bags were held off the plane until it was confirmed that they had boarded the aircraft. All 5 hijackers passed through the main terminal's West Security screening checkpoint. United Airlines, which was the responsible air carrier, had contracted out the work to Argon Bright Security. The checkpoint featured closed-circuit television that recorded all passengers, including the hijackers, as they were screened. At 7:18, Midar and Moked entered the security checkpoint. Midar and Moked placed their carry-on bags on the belt of the X-ray machine and proceeded through the first metal detector. Both set off the alarm, and they were directed to a second metal detector. Midar did not trigger the alarm and was permitted through the checkpoint. After Moked set it off, a screener wanded him. He passed this inspection. About 20 minutes later, at 7:35, another passenger for Flight 77, Hani Hanjour, placed 2 carry-on bags on the X-ray belt in the main terminal's west checkpoint and proceeded without alarm through the metal detector. A short time later, Nawaf and Salim al-Hamzi entered the same checkpoint. Salim al-Hamzi cleared the metal detector and was permitted through. Nawaf al-Hamzi set off the alarms for both the first and second metal detectors and was then hand-wanded before being passed. In addition, his over-the-shoulder carry-on bag was swiped by an explosive trace detector and then passed. The video footage indicates that he was carrying an unidentified item in his back pocket, clipped to its rim. When the local Civil Aviation Security Office of the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, later investigated these security screening operations, the screeners recalled nothing out of the ordinary. They could not recall that any of the passengers they screened were CAPS selectees. We asked a screening expert to review the videotape of the hand-wanding, and he found the quality of the screener's work to have been marginal at best. The screener should have resolved what set off the alarm, and in the case of both Moked and Hazmi, it was clear that he did not. At 7:50, Majid Moked and Khalid al-Midar boarded the flight and were seated in 12A and 12B in coach. Hani Hanjour, assigned to seat 1B, first class, soon followed. The Hazmi brothers, sitting in 5E and 5F, joined Hanjour in the first-class cabin. Newark, United 93. Between 7:03 and 7:39, Saeed al-Ghamdi, Ahmed al-Nami, Ahmed al-Haznawi, and Ziad Jarrah checked in at the United Airlines ticket counter for Flight 93, going to Los Angeles. 2 checked bags, 2 did not. Haznawi was selected by CAPS. His checked bag was screened for explosives and then loaded on the plane. The 4 men passed through the security checkpoint, owned by United Airlines and operated under contract by Argon Bright Security. Like the checkpoints in Boston, it lacked closed-circuit television surveillance, so there is no documentary evidence to indicate when the hijackers passed through the checkpoint, what alarms may have been triggered, or what security procedures were administered. The FAA interviewed the screeners later. None recalled anything unusual or suspicious. The 4 men boarded the plane between 7:39 and 7:48. All 4 had seats in the first-class cabin. Their plane had no business class section. Jarrah was in seat 1B, closest to the cockpit. Nami was in 3C, Ghamdi in 3D, and Haznawi in 6B. The 19 men were aboard 4 transcontinental flights. They were planning to hijack these planes and turn them into large guided missiles loaded with up to 11,400 gallons of jet fuel. By 8 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, they had defeated all the security layers that America's civil aviation security system then had in place to prevent a hijacking. The hijacking of American 11. American Airlines Flight 11 provided nonstop service from Boston to Los Angeles. On September 11th, Captain John Oganowski and First Officer Thomas McGinnis piloted the Boeing 767. It carried its full capacity of 9 flight attendants. 81 passengers boarded the flight with them, including the 5 terrorists. The plane took off at 7:59. Just before 8:14, it had climbed to 26,000 feet. not quite its initial assigned cruising altitude of 29,000 feet. All communications and flight profile data were normal. About this time, the fasten seatbelt sign would usually have been turned off, and the flight attendants would have begun preparing for cabin service. At that same time, American 11 had its last routine communication with the ground when it acknowledged navigational instructions from the FAA's Air Traffic Control, ATC, center in Boston. 16 seconds after the transmission, ATC instructed the aircraft's pilots to climb to 35,000 feet. That message and all subsequent attempts to contact the flight were not acknowledged. From this and other evidence, we believe the hijacking began at 8:14 or shortly thereafter. Reports from two flight attendants in the coach cabin, Betty Ong and Madeline Amy Sweeney, tell us most of what we know about how the hijacking happened. As it began, some of the hijackers, most likely Wael al-Shari and Walid al-Shari, who were seated in row 2 in first class, stabbed the two unarmed flight attendants, who would have been preparing for cabin service. We do not know exactly how the hijackers gained access to the cockpit. FAA rules required that the doors remain closed and locked during flight. Ong speculated that they had jammed their way in. Perhaps the terrorists stabbed the flight attendants to get a cockpit key to force one of them to open the cockpit door, or to lure the captain or first officer out of the cockpit. Or the flight attendants may just have been in their way. At the same time or shortly thereafter, Atta, the only terrorist on board trained to fly a jet, would have moved to the cockpit from his business class seat, possibly accompanied by Amari. As this was happening, passenger Daniel Lewin, who was seated in the row just behind Atta and Omari, was stabbed by one of the hijackers, probably Satam al-Sukami, who was seated directly behind Lewin. Lewin had served 4 years as an officer in the Israeli military. He may have made an attempt to stop the hijackers in front of him, not realizing that another was sitting behind him. The hijackers quickly gained control and sprayed mace, pepper spray, or some other irritant in the first-class cabin in order to force the passengers and flight attendants toward the rear of the plane. They claimed they had a bomb. About 5 minutes after the hijacking began, Betty Ong contacted the American Airlines Southeastern Reservations Office in Cary, North Carolina, via an AT&T airphone to report an emergency aboard the flight. This was the first of several occasions on 9/11 when flight attendants took action outside the scope of their training, which emphasized that in a hijacking, they were to communicate with the cockpit crew. The emergency call lasted approximately 25 minutes, as Ong calmly and professionally relayed information about events taking place aboard the airplane to authorities on the ground. At 8:19, Ong reported, "The cockpit is not answering. Somebody's stabbed in business class, and I think there's mace, that we can't breathe. I don't know, I think we're getting hijacked." She then told of the stabbings of the two flight attendants. At 8:21, one of the American employees receiving Ong's call in North Carolina, Nydia Gonzalez, alerted the American Airlines Operations Center in Fort Worth, Texas, reaching Craig Marquis, the manager on duty. Marquis soon realized this was an emergency and instructed the airline's dispatcher responsible for the flight to contact the cockpit. At 8:23, the dispatcher tried unsuccessfully to contact the aircraft. 6 minutes later, the air traffic control specialist in American's Operations Center contacted the FAA's Boston Air Traffic Control Center about the flight. The center was already aware of the problem. Boston Center knew of a problem on the flight in part because just before 8:25, the hijackers had attempted to communicate with the passengers. The microphone was keyed, and immediately one of the hijackers said, "Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any moves, you'll endanger yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet." Air traffic controllers heard the transmission. Ong did not. The hijackers probably did not know how to operate the cockpit radio communication system correctly, and thus inadvertently broadcast their message over the air traffic control channel instead of the cabin public address channel. Also at 8:25 and again at 8:29, Amy Sweeney got through to the American Flight Services office in Boston, but was cut off after she reported someone was hurt aboard the flight. 3 minutes later, Sweeney was reconnected to the office and began relaying updates to the manager, Michael Woodward. At 8:26, Ong reported that the plane was flying erratically. A minute later, Flight 11 turned south. American also began getting identifications of the hijackers, as Ong and then Sweeney passed on some of the seat numbers of those who had gained unauthorized access to the cockpit. Sweeney calmly reported on her line that the plane had been hijacked. A man in first class had his throat slashed. 2 flight attendants had been stabbed. One was seriously hurt and was on oxygen, while the other's wounds seemed minor. A doctor had been requested. The flight attendants were unable to contact the cockpit, and there was a bomb in the cockpit. Sweeney told Woodward that she and Ong were trying to relay as much information as they could to people on the ground. At 8:38, Ong told Gonzalez that the plane was flying erratically again. Around this time, Sweeney told Woodward that the hijackers were Middle Easterners, naming 3 of their seat numbers. One spoke very little English, and one spoke excellent English. The hijackers had gained entry to the cockpit, and she did not know how. The aircraft was in rapid descent. At 8:41, Sweeney told Woodward that passengers and coach were under the impression that there was a routine medical emergency in first class. Other flight attendants were busy at duties, such as getting medical supplies, while Ong and Sweeney were reporting the events. At 8:41, in American's Operations Center, a colleague told Marquis that the air traffic controllers declared Flight 11 a hijacking, and thinks he's American 11 headed toward Kennedy Airport in New York City. They're moving everybody out of the way. They seem to have him on a primary radar. They seem to think that he is descending. At 8:44, Gonzalez reported losing phone contact with Ong. About this same time, Sweeney reported to Woodward, "Something is wrong. We are in a rapid descent. We are all over the place." Woodward asked Sweeney to look out the window to see if she could determine where they were. Sweeney responded, "We are flying low. We are flying very, very low. We are flying way too low. Seconds later, she said, "Oh my God, we are way too low." The phone call ended. At 8:46, 40 seconds, American 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. All on board, along with an unknown number of people in the tower, were killed instantly. The hijacking of United 175. United Airlines Flight 175 was scheduled to depart for Los Angeles at 8. Captain Victor Saracini and First Officer Michael Horrocks piloted the Boeing 767, which had 7 flight attendants. 56 passengers boarded the flight. United 175 pushed back from its gate at 7:58 and departed Logan Airport at 8:14. By 8:33, it had reached its assigned cruising altitude of 31,000 feet. The flight attendants would have begun their cabin service. The flight had taken off just as American 11 was being hijacked, and at 8:42, the United 175 flight crew completed their report on a suspicious transmission overheard from another plane, which turned out to have been Flight 11, just after takeoff. This was United 175's last communication with the ground. The hijackers attacked sometime between 8:42 and 8:46. They used knives, as reported by 2 passengers and a flight attendant, mace, reported by 1 passenger, and the threat of a bomb, reported by the same passenger. They stabbed members of the flight crew, reported by a flight attendant and 1 passenger. Both pilots had been killed, reported by 1 flight attendant. The eyewitness accounts came from calls made from the rear of the plane, from passengers originally seated further forward in the cabin, a sign that passengers and perhaps crew had been moved to the back of the aircraft. Given similarities to American 11 in hijacker seating and in eyewitness reports of tactics and weapons, as well as the contact between the presumed team leaders, Atta and Shehi, we believe the tactics were similar on both flights. The first operational evidence that something was abnormal on United 175 came at 8:47, when the aircraft changed beacon codes twice within a minute. At 8:51, the flight deviated from its assigned altitude, and a minute later, New York air traffic controllers began repeatedly and unsuccessfully trying to contact it. At 8:52 in Easton, Connecticut, a man named Lee Hansen received a phone call from his son, Peter, a passenger on United 175. His son told him, "I think they've taken over the cockpit. An attendant has been stabbed, and someone else up front may have been killed. The plane is making strange moves. Call United Airlines. Tell them it's Flight 175, Boston to LA." Lee Hansen then called the Easton Police Department and relayed what he had heard. Also at 8:52, a male flight attendant called the United office in San Francisco, reaching Mark Policastro. The flight attendant reported that the flight had been hijacked, both pilots had been killed, a flight attendant had been stabbed, and the hijackers were probably flying the plane. The call lasted about 2 minutes, after which Policastro and a colleague tried unsuccessfully to contact the flight. At 8:58, the flight took a heading toward New York City. At 8:59, Flight 175 passenger Brian David Sweeney tried to call his wife Julie. He left a message on their home answering machine that the plane had been hijacked. He then called his mother, Louise Sweeney, to ensure the flight had been hijacked, that the passengers were thinking about storming the cockpit to take control of the plane away from the hijackers. At 9, Lee Hansen received a second call from his son, Peter. "It's getting bad, Dad. A stewardess was stabbed. They seem to have knives and mace. They said they have a bomb. It's getting very bad on the plane. Passengers are throwing up and getting sick. The plane is making jerky movements. I don't think the pilot is flying the plane. I think we're going down. I think they intend to go to Chicago or someplace and fly into a building. Don't worry, Dad. If it happens, it'll be very fast. My God. My God." The call ended abruptly. Lee Hansen had heard a woman scream just before it cut off. He turned on a television, and in her home, so did Louise Sweeney. Both then saw the second aircraft hit the World Trade Center. At 9:03, 11 seconds, United Airlines Flight 175 hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. All on board, along with an unknown number of people in the tower, were killed instantly. The hijacking of American 77. American Airlines Flight 77 was scheduled to depart from Washington Dulles for Los Angeles at 8:10. The aircraft was a Boeing 757 piloted by Captain Charles F. Burlingame and First Officer David Charlebois. There were 4 flight attendants. On September 11th, the flight carried 58 passengers. American 77 pushed back from its gate at 8:09 and took off at 8:20. At 8:46, the flight reached its assigned cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Cabin service would have begun. At 8:51, American 77 transmitted its last routine radio communication. The hijacking began between 8:51 and 8:54. As on American 11 and United 175, the hijackers used knives, reported by 1 passenger, and moved all the passengers and possibly crew to the rear of the aircraft, reported by 1 flight attendant and 1 passenger. Unlike the earlier flights, the Flight 77 hijackers were reported by a passenger to have box cutters. Finally, a passenger reported that an announcement had been made by the pilot that the plane had been hijacked. Neither of the first-hand accounts mentioned any stabbings or the threat or use of either a bomb or mace, though both witnesses began the flight in the first-class cabin. At 8:54, the aircraft deviated from its assigned course, turning south. 2 minutes later, the transponder was turned off, and even primary radar contact with the aircraft was lost. The Indianapolis Air Traffic Control Center repeatedly tried and failed to contact the aircraft. American Airlines dispatchers also tried, without success. At 9, American Airlines Executive Vice President Gerard Arpey learned that communications had been lost with American 77. This was now the second American aircraft in trouble. He ordered all American Airlines flights in the Northeast that had not taken off to remain on the ground. Shortly before 9:10, suspecting that American 77 had been hijacked, American headquarters concluded that the second aircraft to hit the World Trade Center might have been Flight 77. After learning that United Airlines was missing a plane, American Airlines headquarters extended the ground stomp nationwide. At 9:12, Renee May called her mother, Nancy May, in Las Vegas. She said her flight was being hijacked by 6 individuals who had moved them to the rear of the plane. She asked her mother to alert American Airlines. Nancy May and her husband promptly did so. At some point between 9:16 and 9:26, Barbara Olson called her husband, Ted Olson, the Solicitor General of the United States. She reported that the flight had been hijacked, and the hijackers had knives and box cutters. She further indicated that the hijackers were not aware of her phone call, and that they had put all the passengers in the back of the plane. About a minute into the conversation, the call was cut off. Solicitor General Olson tried unsuccessfully to reach Attorney General John Ashcroft. Shortly after the first call, Barbara Olson reached her husband again. She reported that the pilot had announced that the flight had been hijacked, and she asked her husband what she should tell the captain to do. Ted Olson asked for her location, and she replied that the aircraft was then flying over houses. Another passenger told her they were traveling northeast. The Solicitor General then informed his wife of the 2 previous hijackings and crashes. She did not display signs of panic and did not indicate any awareness of an impending crash. At that point, the second call was cut off. At 9:29, the autopilot on American 77 was disengaged. The aircraft was at 7,000 feet and approximately 38 miles west of the Pentagon. At 9:32, controllers at the Dulles Terminal Radar Approach Control observed a primary radar target tracking eastbound at a high rate of speed. This was later determined to have been Flight 77. At 9:34, Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport advised the Secret Service of an unknown aircraft heading in the direction of the White House. American 77 was then 5 miles west-southwest of the Pentagon and began a 330-degree turn. At the end of the turn, it was descending through 2,200 feet, pointed toward the Pentagon in downtown Washington. The hijacker pilot then advanced the throttles to maximum power and dove toward the Pentagon. At 9:37, 46 seconds, American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, traveling at approximately 530 miles per hour. All on board, as well as many civilian and military personnel in the building, were killed. The battle for United 93. At 8:42, United Airlines Flight 93 took off from Newark, New Jersey, Liberty International Airport, bound for San Francisco. The aircraft was piloted by Captain Jason Dahl and First Officer Leroy Homer, and there were 5 flight attendants. 37 passengers, including the hijackers, boarded the plane. Scheduled to depart the gate at 8, the Boeing 757's takeoff was delayed because of the airport's typically heavy morning traffic. The hijackers had planned to take flights scheduled to depart at 7:45, American 11, 8 o'clock, United 175 and United 93, and 8:10, American 77. 3 of the flights had actually taken off within 10 to 15 minutes of their planned departure times.
Okay, I'm a little tired, so I'm gonna get going. I might stream in the morning, so probably in a little bit. Play a video game. Since I've been working on art. But I need to work on this a little bit more. It's just kind of so much to draw. But this is all just kind of... This is old art, too. I don't even know when I drew this. I just kind of saw it, and I was going to, like, I just want to practice on something. But I hope it looks okay. I just gotta work on it some more. Add more details. Anyway, yeah. I am going to get going. Take care out there. Thank you for lurking. Thank you for chilling. Thank you for stopping by. I was just in the mood to learn a lot about 9/11, and yeah. So I'm gonna get going. Yeah. Peace out. Later. I might play some Magic in a bit. I'm just gonna get some rest. Later. Love you. Bye. Bye. Bye.